Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Kelly Beard, Content Specialist for Maryland Realtors, and I want to welcome you all to our Broker Summit webinar. We're going to dive right in, but before we do, just some housekeeping items. First, we encourage your questions. We look forward to answering them. Please post your questions in the Q&A box below at the bottom of your Zoom screen. We will answer your questions after our first panelist presentation, and then again at the end of our webinar. We also read the antitrust statement right now. I'm going to shoot it over to Jackie, who will take that away.
Before we start, could you just give another minute or two, or maybe even just 30 seconds? I'm seeing the numbers still rising, so I just want to make sure everybody who is intending to be here is actually here, because they're coming on pretty fast and furious. So let's just give it 30 more seconds, Jackie.
Sounds good.
See when it starts to level off. It hasn't yet. If you're watching the attendees counter. Good turnout. Wow, very cool. A lot of friends. Okay. Shoot.
Okay. Maryland Realtors thanks you for your participation in this meeting. Maryland Realtors is a not-for-profit trade association devoted to improving the business conditions of the real estate industry, and our meetings and events often include real estate professionals and other industry stakeholders who compete with each other or work for competing businesses. Maryland Realtors is committed to conducting all meetings and events in a professional, ethical, and lawful manner, including in adherence to federal and state antitrust laws. Discussion on any topic suggesting an intent to restrict competition or fix prices is improper. These discussions and topics include individual company policies, pricing, business and customer strategies and practices, including commissions, amounts, or splits. If inappropriate discussions occur at any association meeting, continuing education class, or any other professional or social gathering, all members present must openly disassociate themselves from such discussions. The instructor or chair must take every effort to immediately end any such discussions. If such discussions occur at an informal or social gathering, please bring it to the immediate attention of association staff. Maryland law prohibits recording conversations without the consent of all parties. Staff will remove any unauthorized transcription services from a meeting, including, but not limited to, Otter, Gong, Transcribe, or speech text. Thank you so much. All right, Cheryl, take it away.
All right, thank you, Kelly and Jackie. First of all, good afternoon, brokers and office managers. Welcome to Maryland Realtors 2025 Broker Summit. As your 2025 Maryland Realtors president, I'm a partner, associate broker, and the office manager for our brokerage in Upper Marlboro, Maryland. I am both humbled and excited to have the opportunity to greet you this afternoon at such a time where our industry is constantly evolving, with us as brokers and managers at the forefront of driving that change. At this same time last year, we were faced with challenges for which we had no idea how the outcome would impact our businesses. But we're still here. Over the past 5 years, we've seen tremendous shifts in the real estate market, from navigating through the 2020 pandemic to the legal woes and challenges that are continuing to emerge in our industry. And now, in 2025, the potential for economic impact. As these changes emerged, so have new opportunities. The market may fluctuate and the economy may present hurdles, but the one thing that remains certain is the value of what you do for your brokerages, agents, clients, and for our communities. And that is irreplaceable. We are the trusted advisors, the experts who guide people through what is often the largest financial commitment of their lives. That responsibility is something that we take seriously at Maryland Realtors, and it's something that makes this industry so rewarding. Our strength as an association lies in our ability to adapt, collaborate, and stay ahead of the curve. One of the greatest assets of being a part of Maryland Realtors is the value that this association brings through our advocacy, education, and professional development programs, resources, and shared experiences. Whether it's leveraging new technology, embracing sustainable practices, or exploring new markets, we have the greatest minds and resources to thrive. So, as we look forward, let us focus not just on what the market is doing, but on what we as professionals can do to set the standard for compliance and excellence, focusing on continuing our education, improving our skills, and maintaining the highest ethical standards. You know why? Because the integrity of our profession depends on it. We are the backbone of this industry. I encourage you to continue to push boundaries, embrace change, and to keep up the hard work that you're doing. And I want you to know that as your president, I am committed to ensuring that this association supports you every step of the way. As we move forward together today and hear from our speakers with resources and information to aid in your leadership, I just want to thank you for your time today and for being here and for caring and for everything that you do every single day to move our industry forward. So without further ado, we have a very robust panel that will dive into legal, legislative, and policy updates. And I'm just going to take a few minutes to introduce our panelists. We have with us today our CEO of Maryland Realtors, Chuck Caskey. We also have our Director of Legal Affairs, Kim Link. Also joining us today is Maryland Realtors Associate Counsel, Taylor Kitzmiller. Our Director of Advocacy and Public Policy is here with us today as well, Lisa May. We have our Advocacy and Communication Administrator, Jackie Muick. And last but not least, we have with us today from Bright MLS, Renee Galicia, who is the Executive Vice President of Policy Counsel and Strategic Partnerships for Bright MLS. Renee is going to kick us off, but first I'd like to give you a little insight on his background. Renee oversees the customer engagement team, including customer support, customer success coaches, and MLS policy. Prior to joining Bright MLS, Renee was Director of MLS Engagement at the National Association of Realtors, where he was responsible for managing relationships between NAR and the nearly 600 MLSs in the country. He was the staff executive for the MLS Executives Advisory Board and assisted with the MLS Tech and Emerging Issues Advisory Board and the MLS Committee. Renee was also the liaison to the Real Estate Standards Organization and the Council of Multiple Listing Services. Renee, I don't think I've said MLS that much in like 3 minutes in my lifetime. What better way, or there's no better person to actually walk us through Bright MLS's policy changes in response to the NAR changes. So first of all, Renee, thank you for being here. And now I will turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Cheryl. And thank you all for the opportunity to speak with you today. Thanks, Chuck, and everyone at Maryland Realtors for the opportunity as well. Let me get my screen share up and going, and then I will pause my camera because I think I'm starting to lag a little bit. Okay. You all should be seeing my screen, I believe.
It's loading.
Let me get my video, and hopefully that'll speed things up a little bit.
There we go.
All right, awesome. So lots of changes, as you may be aware, and you're wondering how that's going to impact your day-to-day, what's going on in the MLS, and how are we at Bright addressing this. So I'm going to go through this, I'll give you a couple updates on the policy front. I'll take about 15-20 minutes. We'll have time for some Q&A, so feel free to send your questions over as we go. All right, so let me start off with the NAR piece. you've heard a lot about NAR's latest policy changes and implementation and delayed marketing exempt and all this policy lingo that we've tried to get away from here at Bright. The good news for you all is that if you recall, back in August of last year, we updated several of our policies with the goal of doing two things. One, streamlining how it is that we administer policy. We don't want you thinking about policy when you're at the signing table with the seller or buyer client. We want these policies to serve you and give you the greatest flexibility in meeting the needs and the goals of your clients. So to that end, we changed our policies in August. I'll touch on what those changes were, but also we retooled our technology. So the system that supports listing entry to give you quite a number of options on how you submit listings to the MLS, but also distribute them. And we'll touch on those briefly. So first, the latest round of policy changes from NAR. Let's go through those, and then we'll talk about how you'll see those reflected in the Bright system. First, despite all the debates and headlines and everything that you've seen from every blogger, news source, and podcast, NAR announced that there is no change to the clear cooperation policy. NAR's guidance to MLSs nationwide is, clear cooperation policy is still a good policy. There's no changes required at this time, but they did implement a couple of listing flexibility options, is what they're calling them. Again, I think Bright was ahead of the curve here, so we're happy to see NAR catching up a little bit. But they also made a couple other important changes here. Now, when I cover this on the next slide, and for those of you that are only subscribers of Bright MLS, you'll realize there's really no change. Business as usual. Systems already retooled, and our policy changes back in August cover all of this. However, if you belong to multiple MLSs beyond Bright, this is where you'll start to see a little bit of change, and you may need to consult your local rules for that other MLS, as there could potentially be some distinctions here. On NAR's office exclusive policy, they added a distinction here that's pretty important and impactful. They wrote into the policy that the office exclusive specifically is an instruction from the seller to the listing broker that no public marketing should occur for that listing. Before, these words were not in the office exclusive policy at the NAR level, but they've added these in, and these policies are required to be implemented by MLSs by September 1st. Again, I'll touch on what Bright is doing, or what we've done since August, to give you flexibility to address this. Next, they've added a new policy called delayed marketing exempt listing. It's a mouthful to say it's a listing by listing IDX opt-out with the MLS, with each MLS across the country having the ability to place a cap on how long you can opt out of IDX. And we'll touch on that. And that one's important because we've not had that as an industry before. The industry largely has participated in IDX or not, and I'll explain why. And finally, NAR is requiring a seller sign disclosure to address seller instructions for any of the above. And as you know, Bright has long had a seller instruction or disclosure form in place, so you're covered in that front. So those are the changes that NAR has published. Let's get into how that relates to Bright. So on the left is the NAR changes. On the right is the corresponding, Bright policies of sorts, and I've summarized here. So first, NAR's clear cooperation policy. They're keeping it in place. Again, what we changed in August is we took three policies: mandatory submission, clear cooperation policy, the office exclusive, reworked it into a very simple workflow. 2 questions: do you have a listing? Yes, no. And if you have a listing, when do you submit that to the MLS based on seller instruction to begin sharing that listing with potential buyers? So what we took is we took all those 3 policies that at times were very confusing. We streamlined how they apply at Bright, and so we're covered there. The next bullet point is, again, NAR added in the no public marketing limitation on office exclusives. For Bright, again, this goes back to the August change that occurred in our system and our rules, is because of we own our own listing management software, we have the ability to code that to give you the flexibility to enter office exclusives and report those to the MLS. But Bright is not placing any limitations on how you publicly market that listing. For Bright, we want you to get the listing in the system. We encourage you to share it broadly with all subscribers, but we also understand that not every transaction is the same, and you may need some flexibility to respond to sellers' privacy or safety concerns, interest to further limit the wide exposure of that listing. A lot has been said about, celebrity clients and everything else. The more likely scenario is you may encounter, bankruptcy sale, an investor sale, rental property, judges who are presiding over cases that I had a case, I had an opportunity to be involved in reviewing an issue where a federal judge was selling their property, and they had a protection detail because of the type of case they were involved in. They could not afford to publicly disclose the sale. So that was a use case for the office exclusive. In short, Bright does not have any limitations on you publicly marketing that office exclusive, but we do encourage you to share it if reasonable and if your seller feels comfortable with it. The next item is the delayed marketing. Again, it's more properly characterized as a listing by listing IDX opt-out. The industry has operated on IDX, or Internet Data Exchange, under the premise that one broker will contribute their listings in exchange for receiving the listings of the other brokers to help each other get that property sold. And this relates specifically to being able to display those listings on your own websites. Now, the NAR policy conflates both IDX and syndication into the same discussion. We have it separated out in Bright so that you can choose to participate or not in IDX, and you can choose to participate or not in syndication. Some of these choices are at the broker level based on brokers' policies, but we treat these separately. Now in Bright, you already have the ability to opt out of IDX per your seller's instruction, but we don't, again, just like office exclusives, we don't place any limitations on how and where you market. As long as you have your seller's instructions, you have those documented, our system and our rules are flexible enough to allow you to carry out the wishes of your seller. And finally, NAR is requiring a seller sign disclosure. Again, I mentioned that we've had a seller sign disclosure since August, actually before then, but we added an additional component since August, so that is unchanged. So a little bit of difference or distinction here on Bright's policies versus NAR's, but we've implemented them, I think, with a little greater degree of flexibility for you to manage your listings in our system. Now, I'm not going to spend too much time on this one here just because of the time I have available. But I think what underlines all these changes and some of what led up to NAR's latest policy round or round of policies is a concern about what the impact is of office exclusives or pocket listings, along with requests from brokers to provide more flexibility on how they input listings and when into the MLS. I'm not going to go too much into this because we've published a full report. Bright took a look at the impact of office exclusive listings. We looked at the last 6 months of data, which covered over 100,000 homes in the Bright service area. And we came away from this with some eye-popping revelations here. This report is available on our website. I think I have a QR code here that you might be able to scan here momentarily. But just the top line here, despite all the noise about office exclusives, they still remain a very small percentage of the total listings in our system. That said, while they traditionally have been about 2 to 4% of the total listings, that number did increase to about 8% of total listings in February of this year. So we have seen an increase in the use of office exclusives, but it's still a small portion of the total inventory. That said, nearly 90% of the properties that started off as an office exclusive listing ended up on the MLS anyway as an active or coming soon status before it went into contract. What that says is there likely isn't a privacy or safety concern or some interest that prevents wide exposure of that listing. It's possible that there is something else or some other flexibility that's needed. I would encourage you all to, and I have a section here where I'll point out some of the different options you have to input a listing. But the MLS isn't all or nothing. The choice isn't between an active listing and an office exclusive. There's a lot of in between, and I'll show that here momentarily. The other two takeaways from our study: homes that started off as an office exclusive typically took longer to sell. Starting off as an office exclusive, on average, added about 2 weeks to sell that property. And there was no price advantage that we found for listings that started off as an office exclusive. In other words, we didn't find that the properties that started off as an office exclusive sold for more money versus, compared to those that did start off on the MLS from day one. You can get access to this report here. You have the link on the upper right-hand corner. You can also go to brightmls.com/research. You'll find a number of other reports that we publish regularly. Feel free to use these in your client presentations, either on the list side or the buy side. The data is very helpful in helping your clients make informed decisions about how it is that they choose to instruct you to market their property. Very quickly on listing flexibility, I mentioned that Bright has already had a number of the options that NAR is touching on. Again, we understand no two sellers are the same. Every transaction is different, and our system accommodates that. One of the common questions that we get is, how can I pre-market? And I don't like using that term pre-market, but we've heard it enough in the industry that I struggle with that one, because you're either marketing or not. If you're pre-marketing, does that mean you're preparing to market it? In which case that's not marketing. But in any event, we get that request. How do I phase in the exposure of this listing? How do I test the pricing, etc.? So there's a couple of options. As an example, one of those is you could input that listing into Bright as a coming soon status. There's no time limit on how long you have that listing coming soon. Price updates, days on market won't accumulate or accrue while you're in coming soon. And you'll get credit for that listing if it does sell while it's in coming soon status. An example of that, or let me touch on this here and I'll give you an example. While in that coming soon status, you can choose Internet No if your seller has instructed that. What that means is that listing will stay private, only available within the MLS system to other subscribers. That really truly gives you the best of all worlds, right? You can test that market, you can test the price, you won't accumulate days on market. We don't track the price change history. And what better way to test a property than giving it the widest exposure to 100,000 subscribers within the Bright system? An example of this one that I like to use, because I'm that type of buyer, you might have a listing that, the sellers, look, here's my listing. I need to do some repairs. I need to paint. I need a stage. So don't send it out to the internet. Don't put it on the portals. Don't do all these things. But there might be buyers out there like me that, look, I don't want the seller to do all this stuff. Let's negotiate a credit so that I can come in and customize the property how I want it. And I might still be willing to pay top dollar for it. So this is an example of some of the flexibility that you have. Again, the MLS is not all or nothing. All of these controls here are within your listing management system. Under internet settings, you'll have the different options to withhold the listing from going out to the internet, or you can withhold just the address. So you can publish the listing to the internet and only display like the city and state, but not publish the address so you don't have people driving by. So those are some of the options. And of course, we've had for a long time instructions to not include automated valuation models and other comments attached to those listings on displays of other brokerages. Again, so the good example here, if you want to only expose this listing to other agents or brokers, you can choose to input a listing as a coming soon with Internet No. You limit the public exposure. It's visible within the MLS, wide reach, and you don't track the history as you're testing the market, quote unquote. You could also do an office exclusive. You input that into our system. For those of you that have already done this, we have a status called office exclusive. We only ask for about 8 fields of data so that you can start tracking information on your listing. And then once you're ready, you can very easily convert it to a full listing straight from the office exclusive status. So you have that flexibility as well. We have this graph here, or this graphic on our website. It really gives you kind of a breakdown and a different combination of the different things that you can do based on Bright's listing flexibility entry options. Each of these statuses for active and coming soon have the ability to opt out of internet display, so IDX display. You can still send it to syndication channels if you'd like, or other places, but you can control the distribution of that listing. I mentioned the QR code. You may have seen the link on my other slide, but I'll leave this here up here for just a couple moments. If you want to get a deeper dive on the Office exclusive broadly, this is a more in-depth report. And again, lots of good information here that you can include in your listing presentations or listing material, especially as your clients start to see some of the debates in the press and elsewhere. What a great opportunity for you to kind of preempt that and touch on these items yourself. I kind of flew through the listing flexibility options. Don't forget that you have access to a full team of customer success coaches. Our staff is here to support you, whether you're one person, a broker, single broker in your office, or you have 1,000 agents. We're here to support you all. We're happy to set up one-on-one time or set up a time for someone to come out to your office or hold a Zoom meeting to walk you through the nuance of the flexibility options, or just talk through the policies. Feel free to scan the QR code here and we can get you scheduled for a meeting with our staff. With that, I will turn back over to Cheryl and Chuck, see if you have any questions that I can answer.
Great, Renee, thank you.
Thank you.
Cheryl, you want to go? I have a couple questions and one on the website.
Basically, I was just going to ask you if you saw any questions in the website.
Yeah, there are. One is about the emailing the guide. And I think, Renee, I don't want to speak for you, but my guess is you would prefer them to have scanned the QR code or go to the website.
Yes, correct. And Chuck, I'll send it to you after the meeting if you want to include that on.
Oh, great. Okay, perfect. Thanks. And when we publish this as a webinar, we will also include your QR codes on the YouTube channel.
Appreciate that.
Question from the member first is if the property is coming soon and the seller elects to allow a showing, the question is that no longer an issue? But I think the question is, what is the status now?
Yeah, great question. So, yeah, and great question on that. So there is a distinction for a coming soon status. We used it to define a listing that's not available for showings. So if you have a listing that is available for showings, switch it over to an active status, and you can still select Internet No on an active status so that you can facilitate showings. It'll also activate the showing links. Right now, if you have a listing in a coming soon status, the software integration doesn't allow scheduling within that time frame. So you have the option to select Internet No on coming soon, active, pending, your closed listings. So those work well together there.
So the next several questions are popping up now, and I think we anticipated this. And I know you are dealing with the definition of office exclusive and how that relates to marketing, because it's different than what we always understood, a quote unquote pocket listing, as we used to call it, which stayed direct with the broker and the agents in that office. So before you get to that, though, some of the research, I noticed one of the slides was they take longer to sell. Mm-hmm. And you stated it as a negative. I just want to hold your feet to the fire a little bit. Sure. It says they don't sell for more, but is there's case law, which I'm assuming that or I expect you are familiar with, where sellers have actually sued brokers who held it off as a quote unquote pocket listing. And then the seller discovered that a very similar home sold for tens of thousands more than their home sold for because it was displayed on the MLS. Or, well, that's correlation. I don't know about causation, sure. But is that something that your subscribers, our members, should be talking about as far as, and I don't think we have data on this, right? I would love to have it, but anecdotally, I'm already heard of listings that probably they believe based on comps that it could have gotten a higher price if it was on the MLS. And that's the reason we have informed consent of a seller, because they acknowledge that could be an issue. And so you and I have talked a lot about risk management over the last year or more. So how do you recommend that your subscribers manage the risk of a seller agreeing to an office exclusive knowing, at least anecdotally, that they might not get the full value for the property. And then we can get into some of the other
Sure.
questions about how it relates to marketing.
Yeah, great question. I mean, I could talk about that question alone for about 20
I
minutes.
know, yeah, I
Um,
knew that.
So there's a lot. Let me kind of throw it rapid fire back at you because there's a lot of directions that we can go with that. So the overarching, look, you're all licensees, right? Licensed by the state. You're fiduciaries of a client on both sides of a transaction. Guide your clients based on what's best for them, right? You're a trusted advisor. You're the industry professional that they've hired to help them buy or sell a property. Put all the information in front of them. These guides are great for that. It's not to, just because our research shows it, it's not to say that every seller is going to want to sell quickly and at top dollar. You might have a scenario where you have a seller that, look, I'm okay with my property sitting on the market, and I'm okay with not selling at or above market price because of condition, because of interest, because I just need to get rid of this property. Let that be the guiding decision point rather than a broker-led business practice. If it's a broker-led business practice, consult your counsel, consult your E&O provider, read through, and this isn't a scare tactic. This is reality that we're living in today's post NAR $1 billion lawsuit. Several of the attorneys that were involved in the $1 billion lawsuit are publicly indicating that they have concerns about the industry doing this activity, and they're watching, and will there be litigation? Maybe. All that to say, have a conversation with your clients, show them the data, have them weigh and give you the instruction. If it's a broker-led decision, that's where you start getting closer to some potential issues on whose interests are you advancing, your clients or yours as a brokerage. So let your client guide that with full information. I will say one more thing about the comps. I didn't cover this on my talk. Don't forget you're all realtors. We all believe in the code of ethics. We all believe in a healthy environment where you all compete, but you also have duties to each other through the code. If you have a comp, depending on the market condition, and you're holding that off the MLS, and you have someone in your office that's trying to get an appraisal on that property, and that comp isn't available because it's being withheld for any number of reasons, that's potentially an impact. Another property might not get at value. You might not be able to pitch a listing because you know that something's coming up or isn't coming up. So don't forget about that aspect of it as well. You have appraisers that are in our system. You have underwriters that are looking online and, hey, I'm not seeing this property. Was it fully exposed to the market? Was it not? I might need a letter for underwriting to explain what you're doing. So there's a number of follow-on impacts and effects based on the strategies that you're employing. If it's a marketing tactic, talk through it with your sellers, show them the report, and make sure that you have that informed decision making.
Well,
still
we
some
have a lot of questions in
Yeah,
the
yeah,
queue.
so it's-
So Chuck, I'm
yeah.
going to let you
Okay.
take some of these. I knew that
I'm
we would have a lot of
curating.
questions.
Yeah, I'm
And I think we
curating.
probably are going to need another session.
If you make a statement, then we're gonna not consider that a question. And if you ask a question, please make it direct and use as few words as possible. So I love this one. No limitation on advertising a private exclusive or office exclusive listing.
That's correct. We retooled our policies to give you greatest flexibility on responding to a seller's instruction. If a seller says, look, for whatever reason, I don't want my listing to go through the MLS, either to other subscribers only or to subscribers and the internet, you still need to work with them, right? So we don't want an MLS rule that stifles that or limits your ability to further your agreement with the seller. That said, our data consistently shows these are far and few. These are the exception, not the rule.
Yeah.
So we don't want to create a rule that addresses a single digit percentage of all transactions at the expense of the majority, but we want to give you flexibility. So yeah, no issues from our perspective on our rules, but make sure that you still submit the listing as an office exclusive. It won't get distributed anywhere. Make sure you have that seller sign certification, that instruction. we may audit every once in a while, so we may ask you to send it when you don't need to upload it anywhere unless one of our compliance staff asks and just performs random audits on it.
So coming soon, there's a question about to be shown. Is that still a bright line? Coming soon, listings cannot be shown.
Correct.
That has not changed.
Correct. And that includes in your own office. The idea here is if it's available for showings, you should, including folks in your own office, you should make it widely available without discrimination or any, impediments to other subscribers. If you have an instruction from the seller that says, don't show my property, we're staging it, any number of reasons, then coming soon is the appropriate status. And that means no showings to anyone, including in your own office.
So a member posted a link to a Zillow research report that claimed there is in fact significant differences between office exclusives and those marketed. The methodology I find incredibly suspect because it uses estimates to compare potential sale prices after the fact. I'm not going to pay attention to that. So it's because I just read it very, very briefly. So I might have missed some nuance. As soon as I scanned it and said their methodology included Zestimates to compare sales that were on the MLS versus off MLS sales, I discounted it. So we're not going to talk about that.
And I will say on that, Chuck, is the research that I touched on was conducted by our in-house economist, Dr. Lisa.
Yes.
And it's data that's closer to home, and that's, you can point to that listing down the street. So that information is tailored for everyone that is a Bright subscriber because it's from our service area.
Yeah. Could you check on a little bit? And this is a question that I had actually some thoughts on. There's daylight between NAR's policies and Bright's. So explain a little bit your interaction with NAR. They put out these kind of mandatory rules, but explain a little bit about the relationship between Bright and NAR and how there's room enough to facilitate different policies. I think that's a question that a lot of people have.
Sure. Yeah, where there might be some daylight is in our rule writing, right? So NAR publishes policies, and then staff creates, the implement or the enabling rules behind that. At the NAR level, really what controls are their policies, and their longstanding guidance has been, look, your rules don't have to be verbatim as long as everything meets the purpose and intent of the policy that was promulgated. And as we look at our rules and our policy making at Bright, everything that we do really is in keeping with the purpose and intent of the policies that are published. We just do it differently because some of it might be accommodated by our software. It's one of the huge benefits of owning our own listing management software is that there's a lot of rules. Truth be told, the Bright rule set is down to about 8 enforceable rules. The NAR policy handbook, it's something like 123 pages. We're down to like 8 rules because a lot of that is addressed through our software. There's some things that we have programmed in through our business rules, which means when you input a field, we might pop up a reminder or a validation tool. Rather than force our subscribers to have to enter a piece of data or do something, look, the robots in the computer system are smart enough to do a lot of things. So we err on the side of letting technology do that. And so for that, we don't often need a rule. But also in the way we implement things is that NAR is creating policies for 550 MLSs across the country with varying degrees of technology sophistication, policy sophistication, and implementation, legal counsel. And we're fortunate at Bright that we have a lot of technology resources that we're able to address a lot of these things a little bit differently. So we've pared down our policies and kind of merged at times a handful of them, like we did in August, to make it cleaner for our subscribers to understand and follow the rules. And so you'll find that there's a lot of similarities. Where the daylight comes in is in our technical implementation and enforcement.
2 more real quick ones. There's a last one, but I'm not sure it's an actual question. First is more brief recapping. So agents do not have access to office exclusive listings of other agents included in Bright. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Yeah. And the last is, can you just restate what test the market in Bright meant?
Yeah, the example that I used is really the debate that we've seen online, right? I need to withhold a listing from eyeballs because I'm testing the market. The Bright system accommodates that, right? There's no better way to test the market than expose it to other practitioners in the area. The common complaints are, well, I don't want to put in the MLS because I don't want days on market. I don't want my price history tracked. Our coming soon already accommodates that, right? We don't track price changes or days on market in our coming soon status. So the more appropriate status for someone that wants to test the market would be coming soon. And maybe even consider selecting coming soon with internet no. That way the listing only stays within the Bright system. It's exposed to other subscribers who themselves have clients that are potentially looking to help you test the market by giving you offers on pricing or give you feedback based on what they're seeing. So coming soon internet no gives you an option to test the market without having that trail of history when you switch over to an active status.
Renee, thank you so much. That's all we have time for right now. Other people can reach out with them. No, there's our questions still, but we have a lot of other information to get to. That was incredibly helpful. I hope everybody agrees, and we appreciate your time.
Thank you all
very
Thanks.
much. You do not have to
Thank you,
stay for the
Renee.
rest because you have other things to do, I'm sure. Thanks, Renee. All right, who's up next? Cheryl?
All right, well, we have everybody here, so let's go over to Lisa May.
Cheryl, thank you so much. Thanks to all of you for being here today. I was tasked with giving a little bit of an overview of our General Assembly session, which just wrapped up not quite 3 weeks ago. And it was a long one. It was a difficult one, especially because of our budget situation. And I think we've all heard about that. There were a lot of very bad proposals for real estate in terms of trying to bridge our budget gap and looking for ways to raise revenue. It might be some small consolation, but I can honestly say, sitting here today, it could have been much, much worse. And for some industries, it was in fact worse than how real estate turned out. In that budget, we had everything from transfer taxes, increased property taxes, elimination of opportunity zones, reducing the estate tax limits, all sorts of proposals that were out there. And by and large, we avoided the worst of those. We'll talk more about that in our upcoming, and I'll put in a plug, I know Kelly would want me to, for our upcoming webinar on May 22nd, which is our session wrap-up webinar. Well, we'll get into all of the ins and outs of this. You'll also see our normal Realtor Magazine article and all of those things. But for all of you, for brokers, there were a couple of things that we did want to highlight. Some changes, largely Realtor initiatives, that we were still able to introduce and get passed, even in a session that was completely dominated by budget and financial issues. The first of those has to do with assignment of contracts within a real estate transaction. And informally, we all refer to this as quote unquote wholesaling. Chuck's adding the quotes there for me. Thank you. This has been an issue that we've been trying to address for a number of years now. Initially, we wanted those who are engaging in assignment of contracts to be real estate licensees. Ran into some issues with that within the Department of Labor, within the Real Estate Commission. So as an interim measure, or at least as a measure of protection that we could provide to consumers in the more immediate future, we had this bill. It was House Bill 124, Senate Bill 160. And what that bill does is, beginning October 1, if you might be assigning a contract, you need to provide a disclosure to the person who is selling the property to let them know, I might not be your ultimate buyer. And then also, as the assigner, you need to let the person you would be assigning the contract to, you need to let them know I only hold an equitable interest in this property. I am not the landowner. I may not be able to deliver title to you, which should also set off as a buyer, I need to look at what my mortgage approval looks like. Does my financing allow me to continue in this transaction to have a contract assigned to me as opposed to dealing directly with the property owner? So this is a level of transparency that is lacking currently, and we have heard from our members, they've been involved in transactions where contracts were assigned 3, 4, 5 times and ultimately ended up with a buyer that was using a federal loan product that didn't allow them to complete the transaction. This at least lets people know who they are dealing with. And also, if the disclosure is not made, the buyer or the seller can rescind the offer, can rescind the agreement at any time before settlement without penalty. So coming October 1, and of course, we'll be working with Kim and Taylor to make sure that this is incorporated into the appropriate forms. That will be a change that is coming forward. Another bill that we worked on has to do with the fraudulent real estate practice that we know as squatting. Many of you have had to deal with squatters in a listing or a rental property that was maybe between tenants. It also occurs in vacant properties that are maybe being renovated or that are under foreclosure. And the state finally has agreed, I think because they reached a critical mass of these squatting incidents in these legislators' districts where they maybe had to step in and personally intervene into them. We now have an expedited wrongful detainer process to get these disputes before a judge as quickly as possible. And the reason why a few of these bills really just allowed the homeowner to sign an affidavit and say, yep, this is my property, they shouldn't be there, and get the unlawful person out. In this age of real estate fraud, rental scams, the occupants of these properties may think that they are lawful. They might not be true squatters. They may have been scammed into signing a fraudulent lease agreement and have no idea. They've been paying rent, they paid their deposit, they moved in, they were very transparent about it. Having a court be the finders of fact in this was a very important thing to protect everyone's rights within this. And for law enforcement, when they show up, they don't want to be judge and jury or take sides between a he said, she said argument over who is lawfully present within the dwelling. So that too, October 1, we can look forward to that. It may not sound as strong as we may want it to be, but understood that we went through a lot of opposition from tenants groups that said, you put something in place, big bad landlords are going to come and they're going to use this to evict lawful tenants that they just don't like and they don't want there anymore. Getting anything through the General Assembly on this issue was a very positive step forward for our industry and for homeowners. The final one I'm going to talk about, and this bill does a lot. It was sort of a cleanup bill, I guess you could say, regarding continuing education. Those statutes, when they're amended piecemeal over the years, you get some things that maybe don't make sense. You get some things that need to be modernized. You may even have things that conflict with one another. So I'm going to point you to, it's House Bill 972 and Senate Bill 680. And of course, we'll be putting all of this out. But that was our continuing education cleanup bill for this session. And it does a number of things. First, you all know NAR has moved to a 2-hour fair housing requirement, whereas our state requirement was an 1.5 hours. If we did not conform those two things. There was a real possibility that folks would take the wrong CE class. Well, I took my state requirement, but now I'm not good with NAR. So the state requirement is now 2 hours. And we think that makes a lot of sense, not just from the NAR standpoint, but we've had some developments in the state, some new fair housing protected classes. 2 hours seems to be a good amount of time to spend, not just on the federal and the NAR requirements, but also some of the changes that have taken place here in Maryland. We also, for those who are not residential practitioners, for those who are exclusively commercial, instead of 2 hours of fair housing, you will be taking 2 hours of ADA compliance. So one of those, it's based upon your practice area. You'll either be doing 2 hours fair housing, 2 hours ADA compliance. We clarified for those of you who offer continuing education, particularly for new licensees, we had Brad class and we had Brad SD class. And even though they were 95, 6, 7% the same class, somehow they were separate on MREC regs. Never ever the intention. Brokerage laws are brokerage laws for everyone. This statute clarifies that there is one brokerage class. Again, reducing confusion so that no one takes the wrong Brad class for their license category. Within ethics, many of you may know about 25 years ago or so, there was a clause put in there that said ethics has to cover the practice of flipping. And we'd heard from some instructors how annoying it was because flipping is legal in Maryland. They had to include a slide in their CE class that basically said flipping is legal in Maryland. And the only reason it had to be there was because it was required to be there in statute. We struck that provision. And then finally, I think the one that's probably going to be the biggest change for this group has to do with broker supervision. Broker supervision currently is a 3-hour class. We have heard from instructors teaching that class that we do not have 3 hours of content to teach. So the requirement now, broker supervision, is 1.5 hours of course content. So that was a whole lot. That's a whole lot
You're
of
welcome.
really, really little changes within one bill.
Yeah.
But I'm happy that each of those were not standalone bills, just for our own sanity
Yeah.
on that.
So before we get to squatters, we do
Yeah.
have a question. I'd like to go back to assignment of contracts, because first of all, this is not a new thing, obviously, and it's a form of flip. I mean, it's been taught in these get rich quicks, in real estate schemes. That's how they do it. They say get a contract, and then for a $5,000 assignment fee, then you made a quick $5,000 by finding a buyer within your whatever network.
Right.
So just be clear that it's fine, it's legal, it's perfectly legal, right? I mean, it is a recognized property interest. I'm curious about the question though, and it really may be for the legal team. What about our members soliciting those sellers? I mean, it can't be in the MLS. It used to be a status
Right.
in the MLS, if I'm not mistaken. Cheryl could correct me, I'm right, but I remember a long time ago that you could check a box that you were actually just marketing a contract, and I don't think you could do that anymore. But what is if a member wants to have a partnership with a flipper, because that's what this is in effect, a contract assignor, what's our relationship with that transaction?
And I certainly would want, our legal team to weigh in on that. Part of the reason that we ran into issues with licensees and these individuals being licensees is you still have the prohibition within the regs, within the Maryland real estate regulations, of marketing net listing agreement, or of net listing agreements. And you have to make sure that you're not running afoul of that. Now, net listing agreement is not defined anywhere in the code that we've noticed. So I think we all have an understanding of what it is. But that is something to be aware of. to make sure that you're not running afoul of that as a real estate licensee. I don't know, Kim, Taylor, do you have anything to add to that?
That's something that I'd have to look into further unless Taylor, you know, off the top of your head.
I knew I was putting you on the spot,
I
sorry.
know, thank you.
I think you're welcome. I think the
I was-
answer is we have to get back to you on that.
I was just gonna say, I mean, the bigger question is, what about the duty of care to the clients in relationship to the code of ethics when a real estate agent is participating in this process?
Yeah.
That's like a whole nother discussion or conversation and a piece of it. Because there are real estate agents out here in the wholesale business.
Yeah, and I guess there's another question here. If I'm gonna solicit somebody, isn't it the original seller? And I think the answer to that is be very careful, right? Kevin Taylor, I mean, his property's under contract. So you gotta tread very lightly. Would you agree? Why don't you keep your mic on so you can just chime in when you want?
Yeah, I think you're
Right,
right.
I mean, you can't, yeah, I mean. I don't know that it's illegal, but you could obviously enter into a listing agreement if the current contract doesn't go to settlement.
You have to be very careful in that situation.
Exactly, yeah, for sure, yeah. So the comment was just like a FSBO. No, it's not just like a FSBO, please, not at all, right? You guys want to expand on that a little bit, why it's different than a FSBO? Isn't it because it's already sold, it's already under contract?
Right.
Oh, comparing a FSBO to.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think the question is, this soliciting a seller already under contract, even if that contract's being flipped, is that just like a FSBO? And the answer is no, it's not.
Right, 'cause it's under contract.
So.
I smell a hotline question, guys. That's.
Yeah, call the hotline. Yeah, they need work. They're just sitting around,
Yeah.
not at all busy.
I mean, I'm sure that,
Um,
even people listening on the call right now all have examples if they've been involved in a transaction where there's been wholesaling, that they have their own stories. I mean, it can be horrifying to a seller to go to closing and not know that this is a wholesale transaction and that somebody else is walking away with $100,000 of their equity that could have been in their pocket. So there are just so many nuances to this. We don't have enough hours in the day to go through every scenario, but maybe we can come up with maybe like some FAQs for our members so that we can at least have a starting point for them to go to from this point
Yeah.
forward, especially since the bill passed.
Yeah, because I'm still seeing some confusion about the status of a property under contract and what the opportunities are and options for the contract purchaser. We are, you guys can maybe put together something about what equitable conversion is and is not, and what our best practices would be if we confronted that situation. So I guess I think we're gonna move on. Anything else in here that, repeat the bill numbers? You want to just post the bill numbers maybe
Yeah,
that you talked
absolutely.
about? Because I'm getting some questions about that.
And is that noticed somewhere on our website at Maryland Realtors where they can go see what happened with the
Oh, yeah, just
current
go
session?
It
to
is.
advocacy session round. Yes, absolutely.
Absolutely. We are compiling that right now as we speak. Because I should, in full disclosure, mention these bills have passed the General Assembly. They do still need to be signed by the governor. I believe the deadline for the bill signing is May 27th. So as these bills, the assignment of contract bill has passed the General Assembly. It has not yet been signed by the governor. We are fully expecting it to. So as those bills are finally finalized or, final, then we will be putting that summary up on our advocacy page as we do every year. And also handing it off to Kim and Taylor, to update all of our forms and update all of our, legal legislative outlines, all of those things that we do every year as we approach those October 1 implementation dates for these bills.
Question about the 2-hour fair housing acceptable for NAR. The answer is yes, that's the entire reason we did it. So it's a twofer now. That's why, so we didn't want to make you have to take the Maryland CE, and then also the NAR 2-hour class. So the path of least resistance was to do both. So it is a twofer.
Now, just to also say, because we actually had this conversation this morning, the full requirements of ethics are not in statute. The requirement to take ethics is in statute. Any ethics class, the 2.0 ethics class that you take through Maryland Realtors or your local Realtor Association is guaranteed to fulfill both requirements. Sometimes folks take ethics classes that are put together by other providers, which may or may not fulfill NAR requirements. Just be really, be really sure before you sign up for an ethics class that, yeah, it is going to fulfill both of those. But if you come to Maryland Realtors or one of your local associations, then yes, that class is going to fulfill both NAR and state requirements.
Thanks, Lisa.
Quick update on land records paywall.
Oh, I'm surprised we got this question. Nice. All right, yeah, quick update. I guess to cut to the end, still a work in progress. We learned about this first back in March, that a new land record system was coming, and along with it was going to come a complete overhaul of the fee structure to access Maryland land records. And the rationale given for it, and I apologize if this is a repeat for everyone, we did put a brief summary of this in our April 4th Maryland Realtor report, so about 4 weeks ago. But the rationale that the archives gave for this is they used to have subscriptions for very high volume users, and then it was free for the lower volume users. What had happened was the high volume users figured out, well, gee, if we just have our individual employees sign up, we can get out of paying the high volume subscription and get what we were getting for free. And in this age of AI, there were bots that were going into the land records system, scraping the data. So the servers were being taxed, the servers were being used, but no one was paying for the service any longer. That prompted the discussion of, we need a fee to maintain our infrastructure that provides this data. 20 cents per page was what they came out with. And on our side, that 20 cents per page was allegedly going to provide approximately $12 million per year in revenue to the archives. We haven't had the transparency we might like to see to figure out, does 20 cents a page really provide $12 million? It might, from our standpoint, we think it provides much, much more, given all of the people who need to be in the land records, dealing with those, looking at them, because it's a fee per page view, not just per page printed or downloaded, a fee per view. It doesn't impact our members to the same extent it impacts, say, for instance, the title industry, the legal industry. So the Land Title Association, the Bar Association have really been the lead groups on this. However, we have been in close coordination with them, with the appraisers, with surveyors, even architects, mortgage lenders, all because if the fees go up for each of those groups and they are passed along as part of a real estate transaction, then we could be talking some significant dollars that are added to a real estate settlement. So we had meetings just this week, that conglomerate, that coalition. We had initial meetings with the administration. We're continuing to have further meetings with the administration. We've been told that there will be at least a 2-week notice before the fee is implemented. So right now we're in the, let's see if we can get this stopped or delayed in an informal basis. because a lot of the formal actions we can take have a much longer horizon. Things like FOIA requests, have not ruled out introducing legislation in the next General Assembly session or even a special budget session if it takes place this fall. But those things won't help in the immediate term. That can roll back something. That's not going to stop it from being implemented in the first place. So right now we're in that kind of soft diplomacy, that the politicking, the who knows whom, who can influence whom kind of a game on this. Once there are developments, we will let you know. I think this has been said in terms of the settlement, you know, we're not going to say something just to say something. We're not going to, maybe be the first, but we will be the most accurate that we can be. We will let you know as soon as there is a positive development. But until then, please know we are working on this along with our other coalition partners on this issue to make sure that we get the best outcome, ultimately for the consumer, because that is our priority in this discussion.
Yeah, I think, Lisa, just one other thing that I think needs to be clarified is we have a very good relationship with the administration and the legislative branch and the executive branch. The State Archives is an independent agency. The governor does not even control them. If we could just call the governor's office, which we have, and they know how unhappy the entire real estate industry writ large is about this. They cannot just call the archivist and tell her to back off on this. They have no actual legal authority over the State Archives. It's an independent agency of Maryland government. So if people might be thinking, hey, you're Maryland Realtors, can't you call the governor and make him put a stop to it? The answer is no. We can't call the State Archivist and tell her, neither can the governor. So that's the reason for a lot of our frustration. They are acting independently because that is their legal status. I think that's an important little piece that sometimes people may not be aware of. Question, ADUs. Want to give a little update on the ADU situation, what that might look like going forward?
Yeah, absolutely. Good news,
Yeah.
even. Let's bring us back to some good news.
Oh, that would be nice.
After many years, a very circular route to approval, the General Assembly did pass a statewide bill on ADUs this session. It's House Bill 1466 and Senate Bill 891. You're going to hear from us a whole lot about this in the next 18 months or so, because essentially what the bill did is it requires each locality to adopt a local ordinance allowing ADUs on land that is zoned for single-family residential use. That has a single-family home. It's not going to be for multifamily. It's not necessarily even going to be for townhomes unless the locality decides to do that. But at a minimum, they have to do it for single-family homes. And they have to enact this by October 2026. That's great. That's good that the state passed this kind of it's a bare framework, let's just say. It's a bare framework. At a minimum, you have to do this. What our goal is between now and October 2026 is we want to work with our local associations to see, okay, yeah, here's the bare minimum, but here's the best practice. Here's what the state task force said you should try to do. And we want to give all of our locals tools to be able to advocate for those local ordinances and make them as strong as they can be. And to also know that those decisions are backed up by the sentiment of the people who live there to overcome the NIMBYs or what people assume, what policymakers assume their entire jurisdiction wants. So we're going to be working a whole lot with that. We already have a page on our Maryland Realtors website that is a repository for ADU assets. We're going to continue to add to that and continue to provide a lot of resources to your local associations so that you can get ADUs on allowed on as many properties as possible.
So Lisa, can you provide us with the HB number for the ADU bill?
Yes, it was House Bill 1466 and Senate Bill 891.
Okay, thank you. It's ironic that we had a meeting this morning
Yeah.
with our public policy committee. And one of the things that we actually discussed and touched on was the outrageous condo or HOA fees. So can you answer the question? This is the question. I would like to know if the outrageous condo and HOA fees, timelines, and chaotic systems to order condo HOA docs is being addressed. Is there any kind of reform being discussed? Absolutely. Is there something being done to oversee this ridiculous, difficult, expensive, and unhelpful process?
Yes. Condo and HOA resale process, both the packet fees, the differing timelines between the condo and the HOA, and do you have a right to cancel if the assessments go up by 10% or do you not? That has been an agenda item of ours for the past 2 General Assembly sessions. I don't think I'm letting the cat out of the bag to say that it's going to continue to be a priority for us, because I'm sure, as Kim and Taylor and our legal department can attest, it's one of the main complaints, one of the main questions that come in to our legal hotline has to do with the issue of condo and HOA resale. It is an area that needs the General Assembly to step up and act. And right now, as I have explained this morning to our Public Policy Committee, we have a committee in the House of Delegates, the House Environment and Transportation Committee, that is at least fairly understands the issue of condo and HOAs and resale. And they have a good subcommittee that is even more familiar with these issues. A lot of times we can get a condo and HOA bill out of the House. The issue is when it crosses over to the Senate. The way committee assignments work, condo and HOA bills go to the Judicial Proceedings Committee. That committee deals with crime, gun laws, drug legalization, landlord-tenant issues,
Death penalty,
death penalty, all sorts of,
guns, right?
carjackings, like youth crime, all of these things. And they're like, guys, we're sympathetic here, okay, but you can't tell us that condo and HOA issues rise to the same level of importance as those issues. Doesn't mean we're going to stop, but the importance of us getting a senator who is on the JPR committee to be a sponsor of this bill, so that they can have those one-on-one conversations with their fellow committee members, so that the Senate considers the bill in a regular introduction, not just after a House bill has come over after crossover and they only have a couple of weeks to figure out what it does and who opposes it and what. It's a long-term effort. It's not one that we're going to abandon at all. At all. So yes, we're going to keep working on it. And again, I'll put out our ask as you guys get notice of, if you have a client who is just charged something completely outrageous, something above and beyond what the statute allows, please send those to us. If you have a screenshot or if you have a receipt, please flood my inbox, because those are all examples that we can use in our conversations with elected officials to say, see, this is why the current system is not working. Because the limits in the code are just being ignored because they can be.
Great, thanks, Lisa. Let's turn it over to, right, Cheryl. Yeah, I see you.
Yes, we're gonna move
This is a good
along
time.
and we're
Thanks,
gonna go.
everybody, for hanging in there. We will definitely keep going. But yeah, let's hear from the legal department. Yes?
Exactly. So we're going to go
Okay.
over to legal and regulatory updates with Kim Link and Taylor Kitzmiller, followed by Jackie Mewick regarding our broker portal. So, all right, Taylor and Kim, take it away.
Thanks, Cheryl. Hi, everyone. We'd like to take some time today to revisit the issue of compensation and the forms. And by we, I mean Taylor. But before we get to that, I'd like to go over a few topics that we've been seeing recently on the legal hotline. And while I'm at it, I might as well plug the legal hotline. You know that we're available Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 10 to 12 and 2 to 4 for phone calls. And you could submit written questions anytime through our website. So what we've been seeing a lot of recently are landlord-tenant issues. And you know that the Renters' Rights and Stabilization Act was passed or became effective in October of last year, October 1st. And we're thinking that maybe people didn't pay a lot of attention to it because perhaps they don't handle a lot of landlord rentals, leases. Tenants and landlords are not their primary client base. So we're seeming to get an uptick in those questions recently, and most specifically, really about security deposits and the tenant's opportunity to purchase. In fact, I received a call last week from an agent who said that he had heard a rumor that you're no longer allowed to collect, landlords are no longer allowed to collect security deposits in Maryland. So on the one hand, I was grateful that he had the awareness to call us, but on the other hand, I thought, where did he hear this and why doesn't he know? So it's really important to have that awareness that the effective October 1, security deposits are limited to 1 month's rent. There has not been an abolition of security deposits in the state. In terms of tenants' opportunity to purchase, even if you or your agents aren't involved in rentals as part of their regular business, it's very important that they're aware of the laws that affect tenants' opportunity to purchase. So if you have a seller client, for example, your agents will want to ask, is there a tenant? Is there a tenant under an active lease who's been there at least 6 months? If so, you're going to need to direct that seller to the Office of Tenant and Landlord Affairs and their portal so that they can log in, take a look at the forms, and decide which forms to provide to their tenants to give them notice of their intention to sell the property. And there are various forms on that landlord portal that address different situations depending on what your seller is looking to do. If you're representing buyers, likewise, you should ask the question of the seller's agent, is there a tenant in the property? Have they been notified of their opportunity to purchase this property if that applies? There are also exemptions, so it's important to know, have that general awareness of what the law requires. I did receive a call from a listing agent recently in a panic because his client accepted an offer on his property but had not complied with the law, and it had not given the tenant notice of their opportunity to purchase. And that had some really severe implications on the closing. So it's very important to have that general awareness. If you have questions, pick up the phone, give us a call. We're happy to help. The second topic that we've been getting a lot of calls about is earnest money deposits. And there seems to be this understanding or notion out in the field that earnest money deposits are to be used as liquidated damages for sellers. And we get frequent calls where an agent will say, if they're the listing agent, they'll say, the buyer defaulted, we breached the contract, my seller wants to keep the EMD. Is my seller entitled to keep the earnest money deposit? And we want to make clear that everyone understands that the EMD does not serve as liquidated damages for sellers. And it's very important that agents explain to both buyers and sellers what an earnest money deposit is. For the buyer, it could explain that it's a way to show a seller potentially that you're serious about this transaction, that you intend to continue through the process with due diligence, and that you're committed to this. It may also provide a little leverage if it's a competitive bidding situation, offer situation. For the seller needs to understand what the EMD is and is not, and that it's not a fund that will go to them should the buyer default or breach the contract. I think oftentimes sellers think, well, it's okay, they're giving me X number of dollars in an EMD. If the buyer decides not to perform or continue with this, I get to keep that. It's very important that you agents explain to their sellers that that is not what it's for. In fact, you won't find any language in the Maryland Realtors contract of sale that that says if buyer fails to perform or defaults on the terms of the contract, that the seller gets to keep the EMD. So it's important to explain to them that if there is a dispute over the earnest money deposit, there are certain procedures that must be followed, and that most likely will end up in mediation. That it's not an automatic relinquishment of the funds. So we've really seen an increase in that, and that seems to be a misunderstanding that's in the field. So wanted to bring that to your attention. And lastly, we're going to talk about the correct use of forms and checklists. We will receive calls. I have received a call from an agent who says it's their first time listing unimproved property. Which form should they use? And do we have a checklist at Maryland Realtors that they can use because they haven't done this before? And we have to explain that at Maryland Realtors, we don't provide checklists for what documents agents should use for certain transactions, and we'll refer them to their manager or to their broker. But also, where checklists do exist, it's important that your agents understand that you still have to use the appropriate forms in the right circumstances. For example, I received a call from an agent about the NPL Superfund disclosure addenda. And when we went on further in our conversation talking about it, and I said, well, did your seller check the website to make sure that their property is in a Superfund site? And she said, no, I just do it anyway. I have them fill out the form anyway, just in case, because it's on my checklist. Better safe than sorry. I just have all of my clients sign it. And that is not correct. So just because it's on a checklist, agents need to understand that not all documents apply to all situations. That's very important that they understand which each document is and when to use it. And if they have questions, to reach out to their manager or broker or to us, and we're happy to help. Yeah, so that's the hot topics lately on the legal hotline. So I can toss it over to Taylor to talk about compensation.
Thanks, Kim. And before I talk about compensation, I just wanted to note one thing. On the Office of Tenant and Landlord Affairs website, they have a great resource. It's an FAQ document. It's about 4 or 5 pages long. In my opinion, they do a great job of explaining the new law in just plain layman's terms. So I would recommend, if you have not seen that document, go to their website and check it out. Okay. So I'm just going to go over just kind of a refresher on compensation, mainly compensating the buyer's broker. As we all know, last year's NAR settlement changed some rules regarding compensation, mainly that offers of cooperative compensation can no longer be made on Bright. And those changes resulted in us creating new forms. And from what I've seen, and I believe our legal department has seen, for the most part, our membership has understood those changes and does have a good grasp of which form to use and when. However, we do get calls and questions from time to time asking for clarification on how compensation works post-settlement and confusion about what form to use and when. So before we look at the actual forms, a buyer's broker can be compensated from 3 different parties. They can be compensated by the listing broker through an offer of cooperative compensation. Now, it's very important to understand that term. Cooperative compensation is an agreement between the listing broker and the buyer broker saying, I, listing broker, am agreeing to compensate you X amount. The second party could be directly from the seller. The seller could provide a seller concession and agree to pay the buyer's broker directly. It's important to know that that is different from an offer of cooperative compensation. Again, offer of cooperative compensation between brokers. If the seller is agreeing to directly compensate the buyer's broker, that's going to be considered a seller concession. And the third party could be the buyer themselves. Depending upon what happens in the transaction, the buyer may be responsible for compensating their broker in the amount of whatever they agreed to in their buyer-broker agreement. I think it's very, very important to explain compensation, obviously between a buyer and their broker, but for this conversation focusing on the listing side, I think it's very important to sit down with your sellers, explain how you are going to be compensated, and explain their options for possibly compensating the buyer's broker if they want to. And to be able to walk away from that conversation after you've signed your listing agreement and have clear direction from your seller. Okay, seller, you have directed me to offer X amount of cooperative compensation to a buyer broker. Or maybe the seller has decided against that and they want to wait to see offers, and depending upon the offers, maybe the seller will agree to offer a seller concession and compensate that buyer's broker. I'm going to share my screen real quick, and we'll take a look at those two new forms that we created last August. Okay, so the first form we're going to look at is our listing broker's offer of cooperative compensation. So like I said, because of the settlement change, offers of cooperative compensation are no longer allowed on the MLS. So the question was, if it's not allowed on the MLS, how are brokers going to come to that agreement? And that's why we created this form. So now if I'm a listing broker and my seller has told me, I authorize you to pay X amount of cooperative compensation to a buyer broker, this is the form that I am going to use. And if a buyer broker inquires about the property and asks, are you offering cooperative compensation? I say, yes. I fill in the amount of offered cooperative compensation here and send that to the buyer broker. That way we have a memorialized agreement that's a valid agreement between brokers. Some area of confusion that I've seen from our members is this form could also be sent by the buyer broker. If I'm a buyer broker and I have a couple options. I could call, I could text that listing agent / listing broker and ask, are you offering any cooperative compensation? And we take it from there. Or the buyer broker, I know how much compensation I can earn through my buyer broker agreement. I could fill in that amount of compensation, X%, in this listing broker's offer form and send it to that listing broker. If that listing broker has been authorized to offer that amount of cooperative compensation, well, they're going to follow the direction of their seller, and they're going to sign off. And at that point, we're going to have our agreement for cooperative compensation. Our other form is our buyer request for seller's compensation of buyer's broker addendum. So this form is only going to be used if either the amount of cooperative compensation that the listing broker has agreed to pay the buyer broker is less than what the buyer agreed to pay their broker in their agreement. Or you could have a situation where two different situations. Maybe the buyer broker, I texted, I called, I reached out to the listing broker asking, is there an offer of cooperative compensation? And they don't answer me. And my buyer wants to get their offer in, the buyer could use this form. Or the other situation, I ask, hey, are you offering any cooperative compensation? And they say, no, we're not offering any. In that situation, again, you could use this form. And what this form is doing is it is asking the seller to pay compensation in the form of a seller concession to the buyer broker. This form is not an additional agreement for cooperative compensation, which again would be an agreement between the brokers. So I'm not going to go through the whole form. We're kind of already over time here, but the most important paragraphs are 1 and 2. Paragraph 1 is where you state the amount of cooperative compensation that the brokers have agreed to at that point. That might be nothing. If it's nothing, you put in 0. If you reached out to that listing broker and you didn't get in contact with them, you put in 0 because there is no agreement for cooperative compensation. In the second paragraph is where the buyer is making their request for the seller to compensate their broker in addition to whatever is stated in paragraph 1. And the rest of it, I mean, it's pretty boilerplate, not very complicated. But another area of confusion with this form is some of our members think this is a required form that has to be included in every contract. That's not true. If the brokers have an agreement for cooperative compensation using our other form and buyer brokers being fully compensated, there's no need for additional compensation. There is no need to include this form with your offers.
I just wanted to interject here very quickly, Taylor. We are at the 90-minute mark, which is our advertised time. Given that there are still over 200 of you on the call, we are here. We actually still had to hear from Jackie, which is really important about the broker portal, but we will stay as long as you want us to stay. And as long as you have questions, you need answers. This happens when we have this every year. So we will never shut this down. But if you have other questions, please ask them. There are a couple actually that I would like to commit. I'm glad she followed up. Unless there's some directly with Taylor.
Yeah,
Even
there's
if the
one from
seller signed
Tony.
the form, change the amount. Okay, take that one. That's a good one.
Yeah, so a question from Tony says, so the listing broker offer of compensation form should always be used, ? No. If there is no offer of cooperative compensation, that form is not necessary.
That's the right answer. And her follow-up was, some brokerage don't use our listing agreement. So the Maryland Realtors listing agreement, man, I gotta be really careful here. We are aware that not every listing agreement used in Maryland has cooperative compensation as an option. Maryland Realtors Forms Committee and leadership made a policy decision to continue to allow cooperative compensation for sellers, to allow listing brokers to compensate buyers' brokers. And we decided to let the market and our members and consumers tell us if cooperative compensation is still a viable option for them. It's 100% allowed under the settlement agreement. Not every association that has a listing agreement adopted the same policy. I can tell you from anecdotally, and as I travel around, and I'm sure Kim and Taylor and Cleo have the same experience, I ask 100% of the time when I'm out and about, are listing brokers still offering a co-op? And the resounding answer as I travel around the state is yes. So it is still a viable option. It is still, I think, resoundingly popular within the industry. And so, but it's optional. And so that's why it's important for everybody to understand what Taylor just said and to distinguish between not only the 3 sources of compensation, but that each of those 3 sources of compensation utilizes a different form. And so we do rely on you as the brokers and managers doing this training to explain the differences and to provide best practices, which we can help with through an office visit or questions to the hotline or whatever, or a series of videos that we did to help understand the differences.
Quick question, I just want to interject here. Taylor, can this form be used for rentals even though it specifies buyers? Like what would people use if they have a rental situation?
Yes, so we actually made a recent update to the form to note that any reference to buyer shall mean tenant, any reference to seller shall mean landlord. So yes, you could also use it for a rental situation.
Yeah, and the follow-up question is a good one. What if the listing, oh, you're gonna do that, Taylor, go ahead.
Oh, what
The one you just
the one
deleted.
I just answered.
No, I think you just deleted it. I think Tony's follow-up, that was a follow-up.
Oh, I got it. It's at the bottom of the answer.
It is, yeah,
So if a brokerage does not use that form, but tells you to ask for it in your offer, you would use the buyer's request form. Exactly.
perfect, yes. And that happens a lot, especially if there isn't a co-op.
Right,
Yeah,
exactly. If
exactly.
there's no
Perfect.
agreement for cooperative compensation, then it's likely the only way the buyer's broker is going to be compensated is through a seller concession. Or
Yeah,
the buyer.
Yeah,
ultimately.
and just remember, and I'm not speaking out of turn here, but none of our forms or no state or local associations forms are mandatory. You are free to use whatever forms meet yours and your client's needs. So even if you are in a jurisdiction and the listing agreement doesn't provide for cooperative compensation, you are perfectly free to use the Maryland Realtors listing agreement, which does allow for the option of the listing broker with the seller's permission to offer cooperative compensation. What else? You want to get Jackie on, and Jackie, you want to join in?
So
Yeah,
just to
great.
let you know,
Let's-
people can still ask questions in the
Oh,
chat.
yeah, sure, yeah.
And your questions will be answered. So if you're thinking about questions as Jackie is giving her presentation about, something that was presented earlier, please feel free to ask the questions. And we're going to turn everything over now to Jackie Mewick to discuss our new broker portal. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cheryl. All right, I'm going to go ahead and get my screen shared. All right, can y'all see that? Great, awesome, thank you all. So our broker portal, if you've been to our regional roundtables, you've probably already heard about this, or if you've been looking at your hot sheet or some other communications where we've put out information about this. But our broker portal here, it's broker.mdrealtor.org. So it's very simple. It's very close to our normal URL for our main website. Is here, and it is a website we have put together specifically for you in mind, for you, our brokers, our team leads, the people who probably have the least amount of time to sift through our very robust main website and get the resources that you all need. So the idea is, in this website, we have picked out all the things that we've heard from y'all are super important, super needed, used all the time, and you need easy and quick access to. So this is a way that we've pulled out things to highlight for all of you, and I'll walk through it all in a moment. But please keep in mind, this is a work in progress, and it will be a work in progress just like our normal site. It will be continually updated and changed based on the changing needs of you and the changing needs of the industry. So this is something that we really want your feedback on, and there's a space that I'll highlight on this main page as well to give you a chance to say what you think could be improved. We want to take that into account. We want to do everything we can to make this as functional and usable for you as possible, and we can only do that with your insight. So the main page, the home page, it starts with a vision statement for this site, and then down here it goes through different departments that you have a lot of contact with as a broker and as a Maryland realtor. So we start with legal. We have some highlights that legal does, although I think they already highlighted themselves pretty well, as did advocacy on this webinar and everything that we all do for you. Continuing down, we have professional development, and we have communications and a mission statement again at the very bottom. Scrolling all the way up, this side menu over here is for downloads. So these are resources that are already available to you for the most part on our main Maryland Realtor website, on our resources page under membership, if you're not familiar with it. But we've highlighted some of the ones that we've heard are the most helpful for you. So understanding the difference between Maryland Realtors and Maryland Real Estate Commission, do's and don'ts of real estate, the NAR 2024 broker survey results, our homebuyer toolkits. These are things that we've heard are very useful and are really good to highlight for you all on our homepage. Our broker newsletter is still forthcoming. It will be quarterly. But if you want to make sure you're on that list, this is a great way to make sure you get those emails when they begin coming out later this year. We have space for if you're not a broker, but you're an office manager or a team lead, that's totally fine. Please sign up. It's open to anyone who wants this information. And here is where you can send us your suggestions. We'll do everything we can to accommodate all of them, but just put your name, your email, and what your suggestion is. Be as detailed as you can so I know what you're talking about and on the other end when I get that message. And the email and name is just if I have follow-up questions to better understand what you're thinking would be a good idea, that's just to be able to reach out after the fact if we have anything. Then our broker resources page, if we come on over here, we highlight some professional standards, some new member resources, and other highlights for when we have broker programs and events like this one, that these will be added to this section as well in the future. These resources here are not downloads, they are links to other places. So we have our legal FAQ, freshly updated, to have a nice, good look. The Maryland Realtors bill tracking, so just people asking for those House bill numbers and Senate bill numbers. You're probably looking at this bill tracking to see where things are and where the status of them are. Maryland homeownership, I'm biased, but that's a great website that if you haven't checked out, you should definitely do after this webinar. And there's a whole lot more, and we try to organize this based on what we think is going to be most beneficial to you and what we've heard from other brokers at our events and everything. And you'll see at the bottom, if you scroll down, we have coming soon, we're working on it, first year at a glance for new members to help you with new agent onboarding and new member orientation videos that will be available to you as well. So those are resources that we are hoping will help you with onboarding you new agents who may not have been Maryland Realtors before joining your brokerage. Lessons in a box. This is an idea that came to us through broker focus groups that we worked on last year, beginning of this year as well. The idea of trying to gather these resources that, again, these are all already available across our main Maryland Realtor site, but making it as easy for you to grab them as possible. So say the idea behind this being if you want to teach or talk to your agents about fair housing, giving you all of the resources you may need easily right there so you can grab them, send them to your agents and talk about them as you need to. If you have ideas for other areas for these, please let us know. We would be very interested to know what areas you would like support with. But right now we have fair housing, we have some advertising, realtor safety was one, new forms from the October 2024 updates. This will be updated as Taylor and the rest of the legal team puts out new forms and resources for what those changes are and how to use those forms. And realtor tools is another section that we were considering. That's the main site. We hope to continue to expand it. We hope to continue to make it as best as possible. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Well, Jackie, I just want to thank you and the Maryland Realtor staff for pulling that all together. We get bombarded with so many emails every day from various sources. It would be great just to have a space for brokers and managers to just come and say, oh, we're going to have a meeting, next month. To come here and to grab some resources for that meeting is going to be incredible because, to look on our site and just go to all these different places is a lot of work for us. So thank you so much. There is a question in the chat and someone just said, hey, thanks for putting it together. But more importantly, we are here for you. We have resources for you. So if you think about something that you need, like Jackie said, let us know and we will do our best to make it happen for you. So without further ado, it is now
There's one,
2:43.
well, look, there's still people here, so, Cheryl, you don't have to stay, no, I'm kidding. Suggest case studies, like legal hotline questions, that's an FAQ issue for Kim and Taylor, right?
Yeah, I think we're planning on adding maybe some hotline highlights in the broker portal too. So for
Yeah.
quick answers,
Yeah.
but also go to our frequently asked questions page.
Right.
We have a ton of information there that could probably answer your questions.
Right. So yeah, there's a couple of questions here about access to the site. So Jackie, even though we call it the broker portal, anyone who logs onto our website as a member gets access to that. We don't have a filter for just brokers and managers. We
Correct.
don't have that data, right?
Correct. Yes.
Right.
We want to make sure that anyone who needs this information can get access to it. And again, a lot of these resources are already available elsewhere to all of our members. So you should not need to log in to be able to access it. you can actually just, once you have that URL, you should be able to just type it into your whatever web browser you're using, and it's just broker.mdrealtor.org. You should be able to just hop right on, no need to sign in or anything like that. There may be features in the future that say we need to restrict, make sure it's actually only members who can view this, and that you may need to be signed in for. But right now, there's nothing you need to sign into to access this.
Jackie, they can also reach it through our main website, correct? Can you show them where they can reach it through our main website if they forget broker.mdrealtor.org?
Good point.
Yes, thank you for bringing it up. All right, let's just go to the main site. So on our wonderful main site, where I'm also not biased, ignore that. That's because I have admin permissions. Underneath membership, and then now resources has two small tabs. So the resources page, in case any of you guys need a refresher, has all of these wonderful videos and flyers and different materials for you to be able to use, different collateral. But you also have Maryland homeownership, of course. Again, I'm not biased. And the broker portal. And you can just pop right on over. So again, if you missed it, membership, all the way down at the bottom is resources. And if you hover, you'll see that there are two additional options. And the second one is the broker portal.
Thank you. Will everyone who registered get a copy of this webinar?
Absolutely. This is recorded. We will distribute it two ways. The recording will go on our YouTube page, but then all registrants who signed up for this webinar will get a follow-up email with the direct link as well.
And then my other question is regarding the 78 questions that were asked and answered. Can we provide a FAQ page to go along with that when it goes out? Because I'm sure that some people watching the webinar may also have some of the same questions. And since they're already answered here, I was wondering if we could just create an FAQ to send out along with that. Just a suggestion. Thank you.
If we can close just, because it's a trigger for me, EMD, as you may know. So the question, it's not really, well, yeah, why do we do this? Well, there is, I think, a common, in my opinion, myth that the earnest money deposit is actually somehow a measure of a buyer's earnestness. And I've been asking this question for 20 years. And the question is, have you ever had a settlement occur with a buyer who went through with a sale they really didn't want to go through with, but they did because they didn't want to lose their deposit? And unless it's a 30 or 40 or 50% deposit or a new home or something like that, the answer is no. So I have disputed for years this notion that the earnest money deposit is in fact some measure of a buyer's seriousness. I don't believe it. I never have, and I still don't. And so it's a one-way street. And sellers are, as Kim mentioned, under the false impression that somehow the seller's deposit is, or the buyer's deposit are the seller's damages if the buyer breaches the contract. That's not even remotely true. It never has been. You will not see any reference to the seller's damages for the buyer's default. And if you think about it, what you would have to also agree is that, or ask the question, then what are the buyer's remedies if the seller defaults? And in that case, what, the buyer gets their own money back? So it's asymmetrical. And I think we have a misunderstanding of what EMD is and the purpose it serves in the transaction. And I don't believe it's leverage. And it is legally not damages for the seller if the buyer defaults. And so I stand by all the comments that were made by the team. And I think we do have to do better at understanding its actual role in the transaction. And if I were king, we wouldn't have deposits. So I know we are never going to get there, but that's my 2 cents. Yeah, no, I believe it. And the question is, sellers believe EMD demonstrates a buyer's seriousness. And I do that. It's just wrong. So I know it's true, and I know what people think. I just happen to think differently about it. So anyway, thank you all. I guess that's about it.
Yep. So thank you everyone for your attendance today and make it a great week. Thank you.
Yeah.